Hello and welcome to Tips for Managing a Hybrid Team webinar. I'm Kristen Scott from the Center for Workplace Development, and I'm here along with my colleague, Megan Russell. Megan, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Russell. I work at the CWD with Kristen, and I will be moderating the session today.
We offered this webinar live to an audience of almost 300 managers, and so I'm going to be sharing the content, but also throughout, we're going to sprinkle in some of the questions that we got from them, so you'll benefit from the answers to those questions as well. So Megan will help me with the Q&A part of the session. We're going to organize the next hour by talking about three different things: mindsets, mechanics, and metrics. We're going to talk about mindsets that are helpful in transitioning to a hybrid work environment and even steady state when you're a hybrid work environment. What are the good mindsets for you to make the team as effective as possible? Then we're going to talk about mechanics. This is more about the day-to-day of how you communicate and collaborate in a hybrid work environment where some people are remote, some people may be on site or in the office. And then third, we're going to talk about metrics. How do we know how it's going? How do we measure success factors of the team and of the hybrid work environment we're trying out? And then we'll close out with some resources available to you. So let's get into mindsets first. There are three mindsets I want to talk about, and we'll dive deeper into each and explain why we're talking about that mindset. The first is a mindset of trust, the second, a mindset of experimentation, and the third is a mindset of equity inclusion. What I mean by a mindset of trust is trusting in your team, but also trusting a little bit in the process as we go along in this uncertain environment, and trust in productivity. So when we think about trust, there's a general tendency of human beings to either lead with trust and trust until that trust is degraded. And then there's other people who are more selective with their trust, and trust needs to be earned and earned over time. So how we think about trust in that way determines where we might fall on this trust control continuum that is specific to how we as managers trust our team. So this trust control continuum is more in the context of a manager and their team. If you're more on the trust side of the continuum, it means that you're okay with a little more autonomy on the team, and you don't have to check in regularly. You don't need to know what's getting done and when. You're less likely to be concerned about productivity waning in an environment where more people are working remote. If you're more on the control side of the continuum, however, you're more hands-on with your approach, and you like to hear what's going on. You like to hear what the work is that's getting done and how it's getting done. And you're more concerned about productivity waning in an environment where more people are working remotely. So a few things to think about when you think about this trust control continuum is, first, have some awareness about where you are on the continuum. And there's other factors that may weigh into where you are right now. It could be that you just generally have a tendency toward trusting the team, but you could also be dealing with a new team or a new member of the team, or you may have learned some things over the past 15 months of the COVID era that have you on a different place in the continuum than you might normally be. So be thinking about where you are in the trust control continuum. Second thing to think about is think of where other people might be. So I've heard a lot of managers dealing with the tension lately of one group of people, like senior leaders or faculty, wanting more in person, more on campus, more on site, whereas employees are expecting to work remotely more. In fact, research out there should suggest that 80 to 90% of employees are going to expect more remote options. So there's this tension, and you're, as managers, sometimes in the middle of people wanting more in person, employees wanting more remote. So thinking about where they might be on this continuum can be helpful. It might explain some of those tensions. So think about where you are, where others might be, and the other factors that may be weighing in on that. The point I want to make about the continuum is that it can be really helpful to be more on the trust side of the continuum. We did a poll when we did this live, and most people were leaning to the trust side or on the trust side. And I encourage that right now as much as possible, because there's a lot of uncertainty and change. So being more on the control side of the continuum can be distracting and frustrating. I recommend a little bit more of a lean toward the trust side of the continuum. And Megan, I know we had a couple of questions related to the trust control continuum.
Yes, we do. So the first question we have is regarding the check-in with me as needed, you mentioned on the trust slide, In a hybrid environment, is it still just as important to have regularly scheduled meetings for continuity, ongoing trust building?
There's two types of check-ins I'm talking about. So on this slide, I was talking more about the check-in when needed related to a specific task or project that you delegated. Whereas there's another check-in, a general check-in on how people are doing, what's going on with the work. Those check-ins should be happening regularly right now. In fact, it may be even more important to have regular one-on-one check-ins with your people. And that's the type of check-in where you're checking in on the work, but also providing feedback, engaging in coaching conversations, and connecting on a personal level, whether remote or in person. And I think there was a second question related to this.
Yes, there was. The second question is, what are some approaches to working with stakeholders that don't have a trust mindset? For example, faculty that may want more in-person time, although there's not a clear business need or more cultural desire.
I think it's important to consider why a stakeholder may want to be in person. Is it possible you need to build more trust with them, or perhaps it is perceived that communication is more effective in the same location? Once you understand why being co-located is important to that person, it may be easier for you to brainstorm solutions together that meet both your needs. The next mindset we're going to talk about is one of experimentation. That might also help if people are more on the control side of the continuum. If they know we're experimenting, we're trying things out, nothing's set in stone yet, they may feel more comfortable about more people being remote or a hybrid work environment. Also really important to have some metrics so you can have some evidence of what's working or what's not. That can help you build a case for a hybrid work environment. So it's not just important right now to have a mindset of trust related to your team. It's also helpful for you to have a mindset of trust when it comes to process and productivity. What I mean by that is it's important to trust that, there's decisions that are going to be made that you aren't able to weigh in on or that you might not understand. And if you trust the process more, you aren't going to be as frustrated by that. We got to be kind of rolling with this uncertain times with that a little bit and trust the process. It can also be helpful to trust in productivity. So if you do have any concerns about productivity in a hybrid environment or certain people who are going to be working more remote, there actually may be an instance, or you may find that productivity goes up. There have been studies in the COVID era to suggest that some organizations actually had productivity go up because a lot of employees felt more autonomy and more flexibility, and so could be actually more productive. So right now it's helpful to understand that there may be a case for trusting in productivity right now. So tips for having a trust mindset, if you're not there yet, one thing you can do is challenge your own paradigms of where, when, and how work gets done. We need to be more flexible about how and where it gets done, especially, and put less emphasis on location and visibility. Another thing we can do is consider our role of managers as providing personal support in addition to performance support. The past 15 months has kind of forced this dual role on us where we're not just offering performance support in terms of feedback about the work or resources they need to get the work done. We as managers are called upon more than ever now to offer personal support as well. The last 15 months had work and life intertwined more than usual, and we can capitalize on what we learned from that. We saw glimpses of people's personal life more than ever just by seeing backgrounds or pets or kids on their screen. So think of your role as providing personal support and performance support. And that's not necessarily about getting personal, but it could be just remembering to refer someone to the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, if you're noticing that they need something related to childcare or elder care. When measuring performance, focus on outcomes. It's important for us to focus on what's achieved, the goals accomplished, the outcomes, the results, and the impact that had, more than the how, when, and where the work was done. Sometimes if we don't focus on those outcomes, we can let location and proximity bias flavor our performance management. Megan, I think there was a question related to this slide.
Yes, there was. The question is, can you say more about location and proximity bias?
Yes, so it's important as managers to not flavor your opinions about someone's performance or productivity on the fact that you physically see them working at their desk, or that you are physically located near them, or you tend to spend more time with them. So that's what I mean by location and proximity bias. People who work remotely shouldn't be at a disadvantage when it comes to performance management. That's why it's really important to focus on outcomes, results versus where, when, and how the work gets done. The next mindset I want to talk about is a mindset of experimentation. So the next 6 months to a year should be kind of experimenting mode. We're going to learn a lot in the next 6 months to a year. So if you have a mindset of experimentation, that's going to benefit you because you'll be more okay with that adaptability and flexibility you need right now. It'll be better for the team as you explore different solutions, and it'll be better for the work arrangement you end up with. You'll get a better result solution in the end if you're able to experiment a little bit. And so you may experiment for 3 months, 6 months, or a year, and just periodically assess how it's going. Really helpful to have a mindset of experimentation right now. Katie Lapp actually even said in some senior meetings that she doesn't foresee formal Harvard policy changes for the next year until next summer, when we're really learning a lot right now. So this quote is from an article, How to Measure Success of a Hybrid Workforce Model. And they emphasize how important it is right now to challenge our paradigms and long-held beliefs about where and how the work gets done, and that we need to be flexible. So an experimentation mode is helpful. The third mindset I'm going to talk about is the mindset of equity and inclusion. So for some roles, the option of working remotely on a regular basis and connecting virtually is a more prevalent expectations, whereas other roles are on-site essential. So you're more than likely going to deal with hybrid work environments, which is what we're talking about today, where some are working remotely, some are on-site in the office. Any given day or any given meeting will have that hybrid dynamic. So that makes it much more important to have an equitable process for granting flexible work arrangement opportunities. So not having the same arrangement for each person, but we need to be equitable in our process. So it's not, we've heard the phrase, it's not one size fits all. So you may have a flexible work arrangement for each person on your team that's different from the other people on the team. As long as you have an equitable process, that can work in a way that won't feel excluded, won't make some people feel excluded. So tips for equitable flexibility include considering the role and work that needs to get done, not just the personal preferences of the person who's asking for a flexible work arrangement. The Office of Work Life now has a new flexible work arrangement policy and guidelines for you, the Office of Work Life, and I'll point you to that resource. So how will they be impacted by the hybrid work for each person? Have a trial period. It's really important to have a trial period for the hybrid work environment that the team is operating in, but also for each flexible work arrangement. Again, experimentation mode is helpful. Fourth, be transparent about your process. Share all of the consideration used in making a decision. So you're considering, the work, their role, the other stakeholder groups that person works with. If you have this list of criteria that you're using anytime you consider a flexible work arrangement, and it's the same process each time, it can be helpful to just be transparent about that, what that process is, and you're less likely to run into perceived inequities about the arrangements you're offering people. Just as it's important to have a mindset of equity when granting flexible work arrangements, it's important to be inclusive. In any given day when you're getting the work done, not just in meetings, but have a mindset of inclusion when making decisions, or if you have a conversation in the hall with someone you're in person with, does it make sense to loop in the person that wasn't there? And then when celebrating, I recommend either being all in person or all remote if celebrating. Some people might feel left out in a celebration that's hybrid. We'll talk more about inclusive meetings when we talk about the mechanics. So we've talked about now 3 mindsets that it's helpful to have and in the transition to hybrid. A mindset of trust, a mindset of equity inclusion, and a mindset of experimentation. So we're now getting into more the mechanics, the day-to-day of how do we communicate and collaborate in a hybrid work environment. And the first thing I'll say about this is the importance of norms. So just as you're going to experiment with a hybrid work arrangement, you should also experiment with your team norms that go hand in hand with your hybrid work arrangement. So talk transparently with the team about how and when you'll communicate, what tools you'll use, what your asynchronous channel of communication is going to be. And also define norms for if you have video on or off in certain meetings, the time of day for meetings, the length of meetings. So these norms should be agreed upon by the team and should match with whatever your hybrid work environment is. So as you revisit a hybrid work environment, you also revisit the team norms that go along with that. Some of the mechanics that foster trust and inclusion is making time for personal connection. So having some asynchronous channel for communicating and personally connecting with each other can be helpful. Having a channel in Teams or Zoom where you're sharing recipes or pictures of pets or what's going on in your day. And then synchronously, I've heard of a lot of teams having happy hours or trivia just in meetings where it's just dedicated to personal connection and socializing. Bring emotions into the virtual meetings. So our meetings are more two-dimensional when we're connecting virtually. And so it can be more important to ask questions about feelings, tone, capacity, intention, agreement, understanding. Those open-ended questions like, what do you think about this? How are you doing? Are really important right now when we're not meeting as much in person. And it sounds small, but using emoticons and reactions can help you kind of relay emotions in a two-dimensional world. A third thing that I've heard from different teams is adopting a buddy system. And this is helpful. And I've heard 2 different strategies that I think are good to share. When you're onboarding someone on the team, think of it as a team effort. It's not all on you to make that person feel acclimated and to orient that person. Share that responsibility, and you could have a buddy system and each person on the team takes turns being that person's buddy. The other way I've heard a buddy system used is if there's only one person remote. And so someone on the team could be that person's buddy and have their screen with that person's face on it. So they're logged into the meeting and bring that person to the meeting and also be the one to monitor chat if that remote person wants to weigh in or react or ask a question. Just to make sure that one remote person their voice is heard. I've actually heard a lot of teams saying that if there's 1 or 2 or 3 who are going to be remote for a meeting, they're just going to do it all virtual. There is kind of a equalizing effect to Zoom. So that is an option. Even if some people are in the office together or on campus together, you could still have an all virtual meeting. And I think there was a question related to this, Megan.
Yes, there was. So making time for personal connection, bringing emotions in, etc. Those are good tips for outgoing extroverted employees. But what about those who prefer to keep to themselves? How do we keep them engaged and connected?
So if you're considering setting aside time to connect socially as a team, I do have some general tips for engaging more introverted individuals. First, keep groups small so they are interacting with 1 or 2 people rather than a large crowd. Give time for preparation so they know what will be expected and can plan in advance, do some pre-thinking. Utilize technology whenever possible. Extroverts will typically be the first to speak. Is there a way to engage with technology that will balance participation? Encourage, but don't mandate participation in social activities. So I think those are some ways to interact with the more introverted people on your team. So we've talked about mindsets that are helpful, mechanics of the day-to-day, communication and collaboration. Now I want to talk about metrics. How will you know how it's going? In that same article I mentioned, how to measure success of a hybrid workforce model, they mentioned 2 types of outcomes to be considered when you're measuring how it's going. The first is employee outcomes. So this is about the employee's experience. Do I have the setup I need at home? Am I feeling like I can work non-traditional hours or at a different location without feeling guilty? That's about employee experience. And then there's the organizational outcomes that are the more typical, work outcomes or team or department or school outcomes. So think of both employee experience as well as the work outcomes. So some tips for measuring. The next 6 months or a year, we're going to be experimenting. I would recommend having a cadence, a kind of rhythm that you're going to use to assess how things go. Is it every month? Is it every quarter? Is it for the next 6 months, and then 6 months after that, you'll assess again? And I'd recommend assessing not just one time, but maybe more than once. Have an anonymous channel for input. So some people might not feel comfortable sharing if they're feeling less engaged or stressed out. So it can be helpful to have an anonymous channel for people to give input and feedback. Like this could be a Qualtrics survey or a Microsoft Forms survey, or you just choosing some neutral third party outside the team to be the collector of input. Assess your own arrangement, not just the team's arrangement as well. Is there some tweaking you need to do for your own arrangement? And assess based on what's working for the team and productivity and work, not just each individual. Going back to there being two different types of outcomes here. The employee experience is important, but also the work and productivity is also important. I believe there was a question related to this slide.
Yes, the question is, do you have any organizational tips for knowing who is in the office or who's going to be in the office? For example, a chart or maybe an Excel spreadsheet.
So for safety reasons, it's expected that managers will know who is working remotely and who is on campus each day. Employees have a role in communicating schedule changes to managers. It's just regular communication and consistent vehicles will help ensure everyone is clear on working locations. A lot of teams are using an Outlook shared calendar. I know Slack allows for adding icons for location as well. Just in general, the most important thing is to identify a tool that's easy to use and that everyone commits to updating regularly as things change. Well, thank you for your time. Resources are available beyond this webinar. Leading and managing in a hybrid work environment is a toolkit available via hr.harvard.edu in the Learning and Development channel, and then org development consulting. It's a nice, helpful toolkit that also has resources available listed at the end. And then the Office of Work Life has new flexible work guidelines and also live overviews they're doing with managers. And that schedule of those overviews is on the hr.harvard.edu site under Work Life and then Flex Work at Harvard. Thank you so much. Thank you, Megan.